Hello, my name is Eric Wiltorton. I'm the Director of Faculty Development at University of Ottawa, Department of Family Medicine, and this is just a quick tour of a Prezi that's intended to help teachers who are medical teachers like myself who are looking to move some of their teaching online. So a few things for people who are interested in doing this: don't hesitate to scan the code. Actually send in your thoughts ahead of time to just get organized. You hold your iPhone up to the little scan code QR code scan that's there, and you can interact with us that way, and we'll see your comments before you even start the Prezi. So this is a short presentation. We won't go through this, but this is a little conference call demonstration about what it's like in real life, how many times teaching online is a little bit like this video conference call where people are coming in and out, they're static. It's not a good connection, people aren't paying attention, they don't realize their camera's on when it's supposed to be off, or their microphone's on, so on. So we're just going to skip through that. The mission for today, or our objectives. So if you're going to do online teaching, make sure that you're very transparent about what your objectives are. So this is about listing the pros and cons of synchronous and asynchronous teaching. Many times I hear people talking about teaching online and they're hoping to do something kind of asynchronous. And this is something where I would say there are different levels. Let's work through them. And then hopefully out of today, you'll have 3 tools that will help make this mission impossible a lot easier for you. And I have no conflicts of interest to declare. So getting started. Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a miracle worker. You're also not necessarily an online learning expert. None of us really are, but you're a content expert. So this is about you finding new ways to connect with your learners, refocusing your teaching, and maybe using this sort of concept of backwards design. You're going to start with your end objectives and where you want to go, and go backwards and plan the activities and how you're going to assess things. My suggestion when you're moving to online learning is to go from none to some to more to better, and then eventually on to best. One of the important things about this is to have a growth mindset. So the growth mindset is in the green. So just like today, there's going to be a lot of challenges possibly when you're watching these sorts of videos. Sometimes things won't be perfect with the audio. There'll be background things flashing on and off the screen. Remember, this isn't about being perfect. It's about doing it. It's just like when you teach in the classroom. Have a good mindset, have a good sense of humor, learn from your mistakes, have some strategies, don't be fixed. You can do this, and we're all here to help you in the faculty development end of things. We can maybe help you with some of the little tips and tricks. Now, what does it mean to you to do online learning or e-learning? Sometimes people see it as being just some way of going on and accessing things. Other people interpret it more as a way of doing things online. So it's whether you're going to access things and pulling things, or whether you're doing stuff together and co-constructing things. Think about what you want to do. What kind of stuff do you want to do online? One of the important things, whether it's teaching online or in the classroom, is generally don't just lecture. Think about this cognitive science approach where there's knowledge, there's sensory input, it's coded into your brain, and then you retrieve it. The best learning often comes from getting learners to focus on retrieving the knowledge they have. So I'm really encouraging teachers to be very interactive in how they teach, whether it's in person or online. So make sure you think about that sort of goal of making it effective, not just lecturing online. Unlike this, which is a lot about pushing information out. So from the start, think about your destination. When you think about your outcomes, where you're going to go ultimately on the Kirkpatrick model, is it just a reaction that you want just to get through it? Or is it this idea of learning and you want to instill some sort of change or behavior change? What kind of tool are you going to use ultimately? And the electronic tools can help you. What kind of tools are you going to use, or what kind of outcomes are you going to look for to sort of see that your teaching had an effect? And if you think about this, sometimes there's some of the things we do online that, following this Miller's pyramid, a lot of times things at the bottom are about knowledge acquisition, and the top is more like practice. So I would say in general, if we're doing something like simulation, it's harder to do online to teach because you can't get people to show you that they know how to do things. But think about that. If you're going to, let's say, have somebody show you how to put on personal protective equipment, maybe your assessment method could be that they show you how to do it and they record a video of themselves and they send it to you. So online learning makes us look at our assessment means, and sometimes we just have to knock it down a level to make it more knowledge-based. The electronic tools will help us, but sometimes you can actually get people to show you how they do things in different ways and connect electronically. So just remember your ultimate goal. Unfortunately, my face is covering up one of the other doctors here. It's your ultimate goal is around understanding. And this book is really good, talks about neuroscience and this notion of understanding. It's the capacity to explain and interpret and apply, shift perspectives, emphasize, and self-assess. These are all good indicators of understanding. And then, so this was actually showing that there's Benjamin Bloom, who in his Bloom's taxonomy didn't even use the word understanding because it was kind of nebulous. So you have to be more explicit when you want your students to understand things. Behind me here is Leonard Bloom, a member of our department, and he's of course different from Benjamin Bloom, and he's different of course than Benjamin Button at the bottom. And then of course we have a blooming onion. So maybe after all this COVID time is over, we can all go out to a restaurant and have something like that together. One last thing before we go through the specific tools, the community of inquiry model. So how do you establish things like social presence, teaching presence, and cognitive presence? A lot of times, whether it's an in-person teaching session or online, things won't work because you haven't necessarily established one of these. So if there's no good, clear communication or group cohesion, people are just sort of logging on, you don't know who's there, you don't know what their relationships are with each other, it's sometimes hard to have a really effective community of inquiry. Same with cognitive presence and teaching presence. And I just mentioned here the idea of taking breaks. So if it's too long, if there's not a chance for people to have a break, to really get connected or to have a moment to just talk about what's going on in their lives, an icebreaker, if there's no humor, if there's nothing that connects people socially, it's going to be a problem. Cognitive presence means that people need to have it kept short because their brains are full in this very, very busy time. And teaching presence is one where you're listening to people's comments, you're interacting with them, and you're not just having a long monologue. So facilitate conversation when you're doing online teaching. Basic stuff. Keep it simple, silly. Behind me here is a picture of somebody's earbud. So make sure you have enough bandwidth. Make sure you have headphones with a microphone. Make sure you have a laptop or a camera and webcam that you can use. Lighting should be in front of you. Make sure you minimize the number of background distractions. I think most people remember this BBC online video where somebody was doing an interview and suddenly their kids came into the background. Make sure your computer is plugged in. It's nice if you know how to have a basic familiarity with software like PowerPoint or Keynote on a Mac or Google Slides, something where you can present. If you know how to do that, it'll help. And practice. You can practice all these different platforms, whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams. If you have any concerns, ask a kid. They can often figure it out, and make sure that you know the limits of your free software. So now on to the 4 levels. So the 4 levels I've divided it up into are synchronous easy. So that means you're doing it at the same time and it's easy. Synchronous fancy, asynchronous easy, and asynchronous fancy. So let's just go through that. Synchronous easy is a little bit like all of these Zoom calls we're doing these days or Microsoft Teams. How many of you have used those in recent weeks? Yeah, a lot of people have. It's something that's very common these days. It involves face-to-face. You can share documents. There's other platforms, of course, Skype, FaceTime, Google Hangouts, Adobe Connect we used to use in the past. Not all of us were a huge fan of some of those, but they work to varying degrees. Practice sharing your screen. So if you're going to do this, make sure you practice sharing your screen. Try using some short YouTube videos to demonstrate something and see if people can hear you. Sometimes you'll find that there's issues if people's microphones are muted or your microphone's muted, they may not be able to hear things like the YouTube video. Use the chat feature so that you can actually have people make comments, raise their hand, ask questions, and really the quality varies with internet traffic. So if you want to shut down some of your other things that are going on in your house, get your kid off of Netflix, and everybody seems to be on their devices and Xbox One and everything these days. Reduce the use of all that, and it'll improve the quality of your transmissions. Okay, level 2. Now we're getting fancy. So do the same thing. You can do screen sharing, like we said. Also, you can start to do things like more YouTube videos, or you can do online quizzes, things like the QR code at the very beginning, where people can hold up their phone and vote. You can use SurveyMonkey and Kahoot and other VoxVote, things like that. So if anybody's had any experience with this, I'd be happy to talk about it. You can use the QR code scanner links to get people off to see websites if you want them to use 2 devices at once. You can also do role plays. So you can have teaching that way. Instead of doing a role play in person, you could assign somebody the role ahead of time and they could actually interact with each other and everybody else watch. It's also sometimes you can do something called a fishbowl, which is another teaching technique. Think, pair, share is something where you can pair people up in a group and maybe have a private chat. So you can do that with the chat box sometimes. They can chat with each other, or in software like Zoom, you can actually have breakout rooms. So that's something you can adjust in your settings when you're setting up your meeting, that you can have breakout rooms to pair people up and go off and talk about something and then bring them back to the main group. So that's worth trying if you're interested. Level 3 is easy asynchronous. So if you really want to make it fun and go on to the next level, what I would do is something like consider just recording a voiceover for your PowerPoint. A lot of university lecturers do this. You can upload this to YouTube, or Vimeo is another video sharing site. Screencasting is what we're doing here, where I'm literally just recording what's on the screen in front of me and talking. And it's usually 15 minutes, so it gives you something to do that will help you put yourself in the video. A Prezi is something like this. It's very easy to make. It's sort of like a website, but it's very dynamic. They have great templates, easy to use, easy to build, and put your resources in there. And then you can share the link with people in an email, things like that. You can use a learning management system such as Brightspace or a Google Doc. You can email people. So again, this is the easy asynchronous, where things aren't happening at the same time. You're sending off a message and learners are looking at it all different times. So tips for keeping it simple. There was this study done of these massive open online classrooms, and they found that short videos, often like the really short ones, 6 minutes or less, were very effective at helping people accomplish and do well on their scores and their exams. Informal talking head videos like this are actually quite effective, more than just recordings of somebody in a classroom. And people, if you talk relatively quickly, it seems to hold people. You need to have clarity of what you're saying, so talk nice and loud, but have natural enthusiasm, speak directly to the camera, and you can add extra effects after the fact if you like, but that's not necessarily something that they showed was necessary to have it can be simple like what we're doing now. Blended learning is another mix of e-learning and non-e-learning. So if you had something before where you were meeting people in a very synchronous way, consider something like this. It's a way to mix these two together. Learners can be at a distance at different times for the asynchronous part, and then the communities of practice can come together. A community of practice is a group that shares a passion, or they do something, or they interact regularly. And you're going to want to learn how to do things better. So this is basically what we're doing right now, is sort of forming a virtual community of practice. Blended learning really helps with student engagement. It's better than just when you lecture. And so if you already have something now where you've got a face-to-face meeting time, consider making half your activity online, where you send them something to look at, and then when you get together, you actually have a chance to do the face-to-face to talk about it, so you don't waste precious classroom time doing lectures. So screencasting, I think, is a very accessible skill. You can go and download software like Screencast-O-Matic. Camtasia is another one. There are several others that work right within Google Slides, for example. It's very effective. A lot of the kids are doing it these days for distance learning. Record what's happening on your screen, and you can even record a video over this, and it's not bad quality to actually take a video from a DVD or something else if you want to record a specific clip. Practice, 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 and it gets easier. So I'm just going to skip over this introduction video because we don't have time. It's just a short 15-minute screencast. And asynchronous fancy. So now we're on the highest level. This is when you've got interactivity over time. You can use this where you upload ideas and students create concepts. They respond to each other in discussion groups. It's a very sophisticated thing, and it's something that a lot of universities do for university courses. Brightspace is our learning management system. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, let us know. I would say that's pretty high level. I'd start with low level for most people. You can upload your materials. What does it look like? Well, this is like a website for our department. So if you have teaching material you already use now, we have things like the FM R1, R2 program. You can actually go online with these sites. Once you start using it, you need to use your U of O email, and it's all organized by different sites. Here you can see that the Civic Riverside has 109 different teaching topics organized by 99 topics. So that's often a useful place to archive your material. Okay? Last thing, other fancy online strategies. You can use concept mapping, asynchronous presentations. People can build concept maps to show you that they understand something. So you can get people to send things that way. So if there's any other questions, don't hesitate to let us know. There's resources on the Prezi, and I hope you learned a lot from this screencast.